What are you looking for? What are you looking for? Those are the very first words of Jesus in the Gospel of St. John. What do you want? What are you after? What's the goal? What are you willing to do to arrive there? It's really a vital question of life, a vital question of every person, religious person or not, to have an answer to at some point, probably many, many points throughout life. Interestingly, Jesus would ask the same question of the people who came to arrest him in the garden, and the same question of Mary Magdalene after his resurrection. In the Garden of Gethsemane, his enemies, defining him only by his place of origin, simply responded, Jesus of Nazareth. Mary Magdalene, guided by her grief-stricken conviction that Jesus was dead, simply asked, tell me where you've laid him. So, what are you looking for? That's the key question for us to consider today, but all the time. Right now, lots of people are looking for the vaccine. Where is it? How can I get it? Will it work? How long will it last for? Lots of people are looking for a peaceful transition of power. Lots of people are fearful. Others, like Andrew and John, the beloved disciple, the other disciple, want to know just where Jesus abides, just where Jesus is in all that's happening. Rabbi, where do you happen to be staying in this turbulent world? So no matter how bad, or no matter how good, or no matter just how okay things are at this point in time, the invitation is always the same. Come and you will see. Come and you will see that I am with you. Because of the pandemic and the dispensation from Mass that's been given, you don't have to be here, but you've come. The only person that has to be here is the one in the pulpit, otherwise he'll get fired. You don't even have to be here even when the dispensation ends. You won't get a fine or a ticket in the mail. But you're here faithfully every week, not because you have to be here, but because you want to be here. You and me and all of us together are here looking for Jesus in our point in time, just as we have the Magi going off on their direction and the Holy Family going off. We're here looking for Jesus, but also with Jesus. God has us right where he wants to have us. With all the uncertainty of life, the pandemic, politics, everything else. He doesn't give us this grand, complete picture of life for the year ahead. Thankfully, he didn't give us that picture last year. He just says, come and you will see. Come and be all that you can be by following this circuitous, meandering, twisting journey of life and discipleship. That's why we're here. When I was doing my exercise yesterday, walking outside since it was warm out after the rain and wind of Friday night, I was listening to XM radio and lamenting to myself about how bad all things seem to be. And later, when I got back to the rectory, I met Father Zach in the kitchen, and he was having his breakfast, and he was bemoaning what he was listening to on TV. And as we were having this conversation in the kitchen, I had this insight, and I said to him, maybe you and I should try to be more like Samuel in that first reading today. Instead of listening to all the talking heads out there, maybe we should turn it off and just say, just pray the words we hear today. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening to you. rather than the clamor of the noise that distracts us and brings us down. What are you looking for? I think it's important to keep hearing those words and that question in a new way, in a fresh way. Maybe what we should be looking for is the wisdom of a peaceful transition from distraction to focus, discerning the journey of where exactly God is abiding and found in the midst of life at this moment as we fall in and attend to following, to coming to see where Jesus is taking us and accompanying us here and now at this point in time. Tomorrow we celebrate the birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King, and I've always liked one of his conceptions, his descriptions, his picture of God, which I think connects with the readings today, especially the gospel where it says, they watched Jesus walk by. They watched him walk by, and then it says, John the Baptist said, behold, the Lamb of God. So they were watching him, they're watching God walk by. And so Reverend Martin Luther King used to say that our God is a walking God. He walks with us on the journey of life, calling us to follow, calling us to discover where he's at, where he is abiding at this moment in time. I looked at one of Martin Luther King's explanations of faith, and he wrote this: faith is taking the first step even when we don't see the whole staircase. Taking the first step even though we don't have the whole picture. Martin Luther King went on to say, St. Augustine was right. We were made for God, and we will be restless until we find rest in him. So we come to prayer, we come to church, we come to the Lord to find rest in the midst of the troubles of life. And so the Lord then is therefore this walking God, and we, like the disciples, have walked right smack into his presence. Here we are. We don't have to be here, but we are because God has us right where he wants to have us. And instead of being distracted and agitated and fearful and worried about all the noise and bad news out there, God has us here in church for a peaceful transition from a restless world into the company of his presence with one another to reflect on these very timely and appropriate readings for today. And so in the first reading, it only takes Eli, the priest mentor, 3 wake-up calls to suspect that God has something to do with Samuel's interrupted sleep. God's always trying to get our attention. We hear that over and over again in the Bible. Abraham, the Magi, in their dream, they were warned not to go back to Herod in their dream, and they went back by a different route. And St. Joseph was the master of dreams all the time, paying attention to those dreams. And so that's one of the messages, that first reading today. Speak, Lord, your servant is listening in the waking time and the sleeping time. In the Gospel, John the Baptist recognizes Jesus without having Jesus needing to say a word. That's his job, naturally, as the forerunner, to know the Lamb of God when he sees him. But John's disciples needed to have the identity of Jesus spelled out quite a bit for them, not being prophetically inclined at that moment. And as soon as John announces him, the 2 disciples start following Jesus instead of John. They just dropped John and they went to Jesus. Well, maybe a better word would be trailing Jesus rather than following at that point, because you have to make a real commitment to be a follower. So Jesus hasn't officially called these 2 yet, and he turns around and he asks that all-important question, what are you looking for? Well, the disciples are curious but cautious. They don't want to commit themselves to an answer until they know more about where Jesus is headed. They ask, a more immediate question, where are you staying? Where are you residing? And even if they had asked, where are you going? Jesus might have answered them in the same way, come and you will see. Come and you will see. Words don't make the disciple, action does. We can't stay with Jesus if we aren't willing to move with him and to take the journey that he is taking. In fact, when you read the Gospels, Jesus didn't stay anywhere for very long, not even in a tomb, as the story goes. And so as we come together for Mass this morning, the question today is, do we hear the voice of God speaking in our lives as clearly as Samuel did eventually? If we don't, then maybe we need to sleep closer to the tabernacle, metaphorically, sleep closer to the Ark of the Covenant, so to speak. Maybe we need to put ourselves in a more advantageous position for hearing God's voice and trying to respond as best we could. Do we make time for stillness in our lives, for rest, for retreat, for reflection, for meditation, to silence that restless flow of anxieties and preoccupations and all the noise that is out there? Do we sit before the mystery of our own lives, the mystery of the temple of our own physical bodies, as St. Paul speaks about in the second reading today, our relationships, our work, our story, and allow God to speak to us by name through what's most meaningful and personal to us? Well, that's why we come. That's why we come here, to find his presence. If we don't come and see, well, we can't say that we haven't been asked by our walking God. Who do you say that I am? Whom do you seek? What are you looking for? If we don't come and see in a new way, we can't say we haven't been asked by our walking God.